You hit on a big point there of why audio's exploded is it does what no other form of media can do. It sells you time. It doesn't say stop and read. It doesn't say stop and watch. It says, what are you about to do? I'm gonna come along for the ride. Just hit play, walk the dog, go to the gym, drive to work, do whatever it is that you're doing, and you can consume that audiobook. You can consume that podcast, whether it's entertainment or information, and you don't have to carve out any of your life. You don't have to give away anything in your life in order to interact with it. And that's why until Elon can figure out how to beam it into our brain, I think audio is going to be the leading medium for a long time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, today on our podcast, we're going to be talking about podcasts. Let me explain a little further. Sitting down with me today is Robert Ingalls, the Chief Podcast Strategist for the company LawPods. For those unfamiliar, LawPods is a company that helps attorneys create their own podcasts, offering professional assistance with the planning, production, and promotion of their shows. So in this episode, we're going to be talking with Robert about the benefits lawyers can see from starting a podcast of their own and what the podcast of creating a show will look like. Robert, thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to have you. Maybe I can learn from you too.
Hey, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was saying before we got on here, like we've been having a conversation about having this podcast for what feels like a year now. And so I am super thrilled to sit down and talk with you about this.
So am I, because I've gotten advice from people about doing a podcast, but not necessarily from, I don't know, like someone who has really made a vocation of helping other people start podcasts like yourself. So before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the legal world, sort of how you made a transition from managing a law firm to managing a podcast production company for attorneys?
Man, you're going to have to rein me in on that. That's a big question. So I practiced law for almost 7 years, and I got pretty disillusioned with that. It just wasn't a good fit for who I am. It was, I ended up in law school because I was attracted to law, thought it was interesting, but I also wasn't ready to be a big kid yet. And I was like, more school. I'm pretty good at school. I've been doing it for a long time. Let's do some more school. And then I got out into the world and I was a criminal defense attorney, and I felt, I was like, I've made it. I really enjoy this. And then I actually started doing it and representing people. And then I started, my anxiety really started getting much, much worse. It was undiagnosed at the time, but that's absolutely what it was. And then I wasn't sleeping well. I was really stressed and overwhelmed and anxious. And I discovered something about myself during that moment. And it is, I like it when people like me. I just do. I enjoy that. And I like to spend time with people who like me. And that is not what being a lawyer is like, especially a criminal defense lawyer, because on any given day, you're almost always the bad guy in somebody's movie. Especially if you're in like DV court, domestic violence court, you're in there and it's your job generally to undermine the credibility of the plaintiff witness who, for better or for worse, I would say more often than not, has suffered some kind of harm from the man sitting beside you, usually a man. And so now you are very much the bad guy in her movie. Her parents are there. They're staring bullets through you. And I don't like that at all. And sometimes you just don't feel good about what you're doing. And so I tried a few different things to stay in law, doing some general litigation, tried some estate planning at the end, but oh my God, that was boring. And during all of this, I'm having this little existential freak out because my wife came to me and was like, I want to have a baby like yesterday. And that kind of threw me because we didn't even know if we were going to have kids or not. And that kind of sent me spiraling. I hate my career. I'm clearly about to be a father any day. And so I kind of dove headfirst into personal development, and I discovered podcasting through that. I read a book that was like, hey, listen to our podcast. I'd never listened to a podcast before. And so I opened up the app, I started listening, I found a show that resonated with me. And, I feel like I say this guy's name so frequently, but the guest was a guy named Tom Bilyeu, founder of Quest Nutrition. And he we've heard this 1,000 times before, but that day I heard it really for the first time. And the message was, you can be anything you want. And I went, oh shit, I think I can be anything I want. And it was really the first time that that message had resonated with me, that it had landed inside and I'd given it air. And I went, all of the things I did don't matter up until now. I can decide what thread I would like to chase starting now. And within 30 days, I own the microphone I'm talking into right now. And I took it back to my office. Me and a friend would sit up after the office closed and we'd podcast. We'd learn how to use mixers and just figure the whole thing out and get comfortable on the mic. And we did that for 6 or 7 months. And then I finally launched my law firm podcast. And I found out very quickly I didn't want to talk about the law. My episodes were riddled with things I wanted to talk about that had nothing to do with the law. So I eventually pulled that away from the law firm and just made it my own show where I really figured things out. I learned the network effect of podcasting. I could get almost anybody like in the local area, like a state senator, to come on my podcast because I had a podcast. And I was like, that's really powerful. And at the same time, I'm trying to leave the law. And I had attorneys in town say, I see what you're doing with podcasting. It looks really interesting. You think you could help me? First client. And then I was like, I think there might be something here. And, that's the short story for, I found something I love doing. I found a niche to do it for. Attorneys show up late to every game. And I counted on that because I was like, I can get in early when they don't really want it or need it or think they need it. And I'll establish myself. I'll become it'll give me time to get very good at it too. Because there was still a lot of mindset issues around who am I? Mm-hmm. Who am I, a guy who did political science and criminal justice and law with no marketing, communications, or business background to start going out and being like, I should help you with a big part of your marketing campaign. So I had to develop that mindset that I am the person, that I do know what I'm doing, and actually learn and make sure I was the expert. And so it gave me time to figure that out. And then I got a full-time job for a couple of years at a bank, just making some cash, doing something pretty easy while I built this on nights and weekends. And then in March 1st of 2020, I quit my full-time job. And 3 weeks later, I said, I've made a huge mistake. Thankfully, it wasn't. The market had never had a bigger appetite for podcasting than it did in March of 2020. And so that was amazing for us. It really was. Like, we were able to really benefit from that moment in time because everyone wanted a podcast and we were very, very ready to give it to them. So that's the short answer.
That's the short answer? No, I know you're being sarcastic. I always love to hear the story of like how people get started because you're right. You can do anything that you want, and there's no stage or point in your life that it's like too late, right? Like you have to stay at this job, you have to start, or it's never too late to do the stuff that we're talking about, right? Like maybe you want to start this podcast, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a microphone. It's going to sound like crap. I don't have an editor. I don't know where to put it. I don't even know how to download a PDF. Or rotate a PDF? Is that the joke? I don't know. I can rotate a PDF, so I don't get the joke. But I want to talk about LawPods a little bit later, but I want to talk about first some of the biggest benefits that law firms can see from podcasting. So if a lawyer comes to you, asks you the question, why should I start a podcast? Like, what is it going to do for me? What do you tell them?
Well, usually I'll start with a question of, why do you want to do it? Because a lot of lawyers will start with it. They'll say, oh, I like podcasts. I think podcasts are cool. I should have a podcast. And frequently they're really thinking about it in those early ideation stages. It's a random act of marketing. It's like, we should just get microphones and talk. Well, what's going to happen after that? Who's going to listen to it? What do you want to do with it? So I'll use a personal injury attorney as an example, because most of our clients are injury attorneys. An injury attorney comes to it and they think, what am I going to do? And sometimes they'll think, oh, we're just going to talk and people are going to get to know us. I think that that's fine. Let's say that you are just the most interesting injury attorney in the world. You're funny, you're silly, you're going to have great guests. People are just going to want to tune in because that's what they want to use their time for. Odds are that's not you, the listener right now. It's just there's not a lot of room for that. There's a lot of people doing that really, really well. And I don't know that it's a good use of attorneys' times. I mean, it took Rogan a decade before he really became the powerhouse. And I don't think that's what we're trying to do here. So if I'm an injury attorney, I'm thinking, what do I want to do this for? And what I want to do it for generally is I'm going to make an FAQ show. People want to know things. When they land on a personal injury attorney site, they're there because something went down. They're hurt, their mom's hurt, their cousin's hurt, someone is in trouble and they need help now. So what I want to do is I want to answer the questions they have. I know what questions they have. I know because they come into my office every day and they ask them over and over and over. There's a handful of questions I get all the time. I also know because I have an SEO report. I know what people are searching before they land on my website. So I'm going to make content focused on those pain points. They want to know, I just got in an accident. What do I do? Should I go to a chiropractor? Should I go to the ER? Should I talk to the insurance adjuster? And 100 other things. So I'm going to make content around that. And each of those episodes is going to answer one of those pain points. Somebody's going to get driven to your site. The SEO value is great for these types of things because I'm going to create content that works with my existing SEO spend. So it helps drive them to the site. They get on the site. It's compelling content that they want to interact with, which keeps them on the site. Time on site goes up, which is good for SEO as well. But now they're also listening to you. They're getting to know you. They're developing that know, like, trust that we absolutely need to get them past that friction point to set the appointment. And then when they do set the appointment, they end up in the office. They hear you talking. They already feel like they know you. And you've given them a lot of information. You gave them the answers to their questions. They were in trouble and you made them feel better. Now they already feel like they know you. They decided to set the appointment. They want to go on this journey with you. And so that was a long kind of story for, there's so many different angles for so many different attorneys. Some attorneys want to do a brand awareness. I have big firms, some of the biggest firms in the world we work with, and they really want to be the thought leaders. They want to talk about XYZ the moment it happens. They hop on them. They set an appointment with us to record. They hop on the mic. They talk about the thing. We push it out. Now they're the first person talking about it. Now, when I go to conferences and they bring up, XYZ topic, that's the podcast people listen to because they know when something complicated happens, let's say the Build Back Better Act or whatever is coming out and no one's really read it and they've heard what the news organization said, but they want a legal expert. So now they know exactly where to go. They're going to go to this podcast that talks about legislative developments and what they mean. And so they're developing thought leadership, which is great. Obviously, lawyers want to be thought leaders, but we're also thinking about that from the angle of referrals as well. We want people to know we're the people who know the things. And when they think about, I have a case, I think this will be a good person. Let me refer them over there. And then I touched on it earlier when I discovered it, but the network effect is the one thing that I really wasn't necessarily trying to use as a selling point when I started the company. But so many people tell me my network has exploded because of my podcast. Because not only do they talk about things on their podcast that are relevant, search topics that are relevant to what their clients want to know, they bring on experts. A PI attorney will bring on a chiropractor. He'll bring on a doctor. They bring on different people, different experts, have family law lawyers that will bring on therapists, that will bring on mortgage brokers that work specifically with divorcees. They'll bring on, forensic accountants and PIs and all of these little things that people want to know about that they're going to be very tangential to their case, whether before, during, or after. And they interview those experts. Now they just spent 30 or 40 minutes on a microphone with that expert. They're getting to know that person. These are great relationships to create and foster because those are referral sources. Sometimes people, the PI can be a great referral source because sometimes that's where the divorce starts. They hire the PI and they go, shit, there's something here, time to move. And now, do you know anybody? And so that's just I'm just scratching the surface on all the different angles that we can use for that. It's good content on your website. It's great for SEO. It's great for networking. And it's great content marketing because you take it, you pull it apart, and you turn it into little video clips with your branding that you're then sharing on social media with captions. So it's really the amount of content you get with a minimal time investment is quite amazing.
That was a very comprehensive answer. The thing that I agree with you, like I have never had such a good network of people that I can refer my customers out to, or I don't know, reach out to for advice. And I was so hooked similar time frame to you, right? Like March of 2020, I did a webinar with this guy Andy Stickle, who
Sure.
was he's a genius. That's
you
what I'm
can't
gonna
be
say
in the
about
legal
him.
world and not know him.
Yeah, the guy's a genius. And I remember thinking, we're promoting this webinar. We get a couple hundred people, and there were, I think, 1,100 people watching live on this webinar. So I look down, I see the participants number is 1,100, and I'm like white as a ghost on the thing. But I was hooked on that, like feeling that we could really help people by doing this medium of content, right? This video, this live. I don't know, like a podcast comes out a week after I record it. You can be really immediate with people, and it's conversational, right? Like I can't read anymore. I read a lot, and at a certain point, I have to stop reading. And a podcast is a really fun way to learn about a topic, especially when you hear conversationally from an expert. To me, it's more of like a human connection that we all really want. Especially, it's really developed because we all had to work from home. So,
and you hit on a big point there of why audio's exploded. Is it does what no other form of media can do. It sells you time. It doesn't say stop and read. It doesn't say stop and watch. It says, what are you about to do? I'm gonna come along for the ride. Just hit play, walk the dog, go to the gym, drive to work, do whatever it is that you're doing, and you can consume that audiobook. You can consume that podcast, whether it's entertainment or information, and you don't have to carve out any of your life. You don't have to give away anything in your life in order to interact with it. And that's why, until Elon can figure out how to beam it into our brain, I think audio is going to be the leading medium for a long time.
I agree with you. I love when I'm listening to a podcast and they like break down the third wall or whatever you call that. And they're like, oh, for anybody who's listening to this in their car, I'm like, oh, me, because I'm driving and I'm
talking
constantly
to me.
Listening. That's me. So for people to get started, right? Because I want to sort of dive into this is, I don't know how to ask this. I'm going to ask it very simply, because you would know. What technology do lawyers need to start a podcast?
I mean, to have a really good sounding podcast, you need really two things that you don't already own, probably. You need a dynamic microphone that's USB, very easy to get. There's cheap ones out there for $40 to $60. Dynamic being the operative word there. Don't buy a condenser. I don't care how pretty it is. And headphones that either plug into your ear and seal sound or go over your ear and seal sound. Now, you don't absolutely have to have those, but I'm going to recommend you have them because it'll create echo issues, and we're trying to have a really good sounding podcast. But that's it, a USB microphone and headphones. You already have the computer. You plug it right into your computer. You hop on a Zoom call, or we use a specific platform called Riverside to do our recording, just because it's built for podcast recording and it gets really high def, separate track audio, video, stuff like that. And that's it. You just hop on and you start recording, and you're going to sound almost, I mean, honestly, it's going to be indistinguishable from the way a microphone that I use sounds.
Very good answer. I'm so glad you said Riverside. I'm currently using like the demo of Riverside. I'm very excited about it. I haven't made the full switch to bringing this podcast. Oh, dude, I'm so excited about it.
Right. We have every show that we have there.
Okay, good. I'm going to pick your brain about that in a little bit too then.
And I mean, feel free to email me for an affiliate link. Wink.
Oh, I'm going to do that then. Wow, I'm excited. See, I told you. Everybody who watches this knows how selfish I am. I ask questions that are self-serving, but they also help everybody else too, because I'm just one of a million people who need to know the answers to this crap, because we're not born with this knowledge. So I think one of the things that is sort of like this barrier that we build up in our brains is that now there are a lot of podcasts, right? And for a lawyer or somebody in the legal world who wants to go out and make a podcast right now, what they might be saying to themselves is, everybody's got a podcast. How do I cut through the noise? How should I go about standing out? So what would you say to those people who are sort of, I don't know, apprehensive to start their own show because they think they have no shot at promoting it.
Well, I will, at the risk of burning some of the goodwill I've generated with some of your listeners, I'll say you're asking the wrong question. You're thinking about it wrong, because you're not trying to compete with other podcasts. It's not what you're trying to do. If there's another injury podcast, you're not competing with them. That's like saying, why would I create a website when, Joe Blow, injury attorney down the street, has a website? He's already got one. What's in it for me? And that's really the question you should be asking, because it's your podcast. It's not a podcast about personal injury. People aren't going to sit around in their spare time and listen to personal injury podcast. They're there because they have a problem. And most of the people who find your show are going to find it on your website. That's where we are right now. Listener behavior, consumer behavior is shifting. People are starting to understand that their podcast search engine is a place for answers. They're getting there. It's only going to get better, especially now that, the king of search, Google, is in there. Like Google Podcast is in there, and they're using search in their podcast. That is going to end up becoming very, very good. But I think almost all of us could probably agree, if I have a problem, I'm not going to my podcast search engine just yet. But that is going to shift. But right now, they're generally going to be finding out about it on your social channels. They're going to be finding about it in ads. I love to use some of the promotional content from the podcast, those little video clips, to run ads. Those are excellent ways to increase brand awareness and drive people to your podcast. But by and large, most people are going to find it on your website. They've already decided that they would like to know more about you. Now it's your time to capture them. They're on the website. Don't let them leave. And we don't let them leave by creating compelling content that keeps them there and nurtures them, gets them past that friction point. And so that kind of almost erases the question of, why should I have one? Because other people do. It doesn't matter that other people do. Now, I'll tell you, if you don't have one and somebody else does, now they're nurturing a lead in a way that you are not. So they might go to 5 attorneys' websites and try to get information. They can read your blogs. They can, watch your videos with all your books behind you, and they can learn about your 900 years of experience. But we want to bring them into our world a little bit. We want them to feel like they know us a little bit, get our sense of humor a little bit. Like, oh, I like that guy's energy. Or more importantly, I know that there's people in the world that listen to me and go, that guy is too high strung for me. I don't think I can work with him. I need that. I need people to go, that's not the guy for me. Because the last thing I want is somebody in a relationship with me and we start going, this doesn't fit. Like, you're really buttoned up and I'm really ready to seize the day. And I think that's really important as well, as we let people in, we let them get a little piece of who we are, our vibe, our energy, who our firm is, what we're about. And so you're not really competing with all the other podcasts. But I had a lawyer that I had done some cold messaging to, and he messaged me back. He's like, this is good timing. He's like, I've really been thinking about a podcast. I think it'd be really cool. He said, but I feel like my niche is saturated. And I said, okay, maybe it is. I wasn't combative with him or anything. And after the call, I went and did a little bit of search on him. I looked at his website. He had a pretty active blog, as most lawyers do. I think it's important. He had a pretty active YouTube channel. Again, it was most of like, hey, look at all my books type of stuff, but he was spending time and energy and money creating it. And then I looked for podcasts in his specific niche. There were 2. And then you look at the numbers on blogs, tens of millions of blogs, tens of millions. But that was still a good use of his time. 51 million YouTube channels, still a good use of his time. We're at roughly 2 million podcasts total right now. And he felt like 2 in his niche made it saturated. And that's the way that some people think about it. But I think that, I don't blame them, because I think, especially for lawyers, that we're always scared of the new shiny thing. That, like, what is this thing that you're trying to sell me that I don't need, and you're going to take all my money and not give me anything for it? I mean, we saw it with websites. We saw it with social media. I had a bit, one of my professors, business law in undergrad, told me that no lawyer worth his salt would ever put his face on a billboard, because they rely on referrals. And I didn't know much about marketing at that time, but that's an insane statement. And what he was really trying to get across was, you don't need to market. A good lawyer doesn't need to market. And I think anybody listening to a podcast like this probably would see the absurdity in that statement as well. Sure, are there a handful out there that just have it on lock? But that's the thing. What about next generation? What about when, the woman who started the firm hangs it up and she's not there to keep pushing it and the brand starts to deteriorate and it starts to fracture? What then? How do you tell your story? How do you get it out there? How do you make sure people still know who you are? And so the idea that we don't need marketing is it's an archaic idea. And so I think podcasts are just the next evolution and just a real beautiful step too, because it gives you that power to tell your story with your voice directly to your clients.
I think the most incredible perspective I've heard on podcasts is the comparison to a website. Like, why would I not build a website just because this other lawyer in my area has a website? It's an absurd thought. If you told me, if somebody called me up and was like, I don't need a website, the guy down the street has a website, like it's not going to,
the ship has sailed.
I would be speechless. So yeah, you just blew my mind with that. We will be right back after this short ad.
When a client calls, they're really looking for immediate service. Because we have Answering Legal, we're able to see every client message and we're able to contact our clients immediately. My name is Margot Gaines and I'm a partner at Gaines & Musico. We started using Answering Legal because we were unable to answer all of our phone calls. Answering Legal has allowed my firm to get hired on numerous clients that we never would have. We get messages throughout the night and on the weekends. Sometimes we're in court or we're dealing with other clients. And because of Answering Legal, my partner and I are able to address any client concerns or any new clients immediately, and it's really increased our business. Answering Legal has allowed us to service our clients in a way that their needs are met and their phone calls are answered, and we're able to spend more time doing the things that are necessary for our clients.
And my first love is SEO, marketing, all of that, because that's really how I got my start in the legal world. And when I first started creating content, I had nothing else to talk about or nothing else to offer my audience other than my trials and tribulations and failures and successes with marketing. So what I learned early on is that the best thing that you can do for search is to create content that's worth searching for.
Right.
And because it seems like there's a lot of loopholes and people assume that something like SEO that sounds as intimidating as SEO is all about like gimmicks and tricks and code and it's really not. I mean,
we can forgive them for that because there's a lot of black hat out there doing nonsense that gets you ranked on the first page. And then 3 months later, Google discovers it and tanks you.
And that's right. And it's also a sales tactic, right? Like, or an upcharge tactic is if I make this thing seem really complicated, you'll want to hire me so that I can do it for you. And that's sort of like the snake oil sales about it. But I want to bring it back to the fact that it's about making content worth searching for. And a podcast is just this new sort of elevated content, like you compared it to blogging. I think you're probably right. You might have a little foresight on that. So once a firm or a lawyer or an individual decides on a topic and direction or I don't know, sort of a niche for their show, what can they do to make their episodes more engaging to listen to and sort of ensure that they're actually providing value for their audience, right? Well, how do they make it worth searching for?
So step one is definitely figuring out why you're doing it. What are we up to? Because I do think lawyers, they gravitate toward the idea of making something where they're just talking about them, but they have to remember they're not the hero of the story. People are not there to hear about the lawyer. They want to know who the lawyer is. They want to make sure that this is someone that they could, know, like, and trust. But at the same time, you're not the hero. You're the companion. You are the guide for this person. Make the journey about the client. This is about what they want to get, the future state that they want to end up at that you're going to help them get to, right? And so that is one of the areas that we want to start at. Not just, hey, we're great. Here's what we're up to. You should love us. And make a show that has content that speaks to those things. So if, again, a lot of my clients are injury attorneys, and they do this very well. They're creating something that answers those questions. So think about that first. So that is the angle. You, depending on what you're doing, make sure you know what the show is going to be about and that it's going to serve your end listener and cause an action at the back end of that that's going to be the action that you want. And then how do we make it good? Now that can be a little more difficult, because I will have legal marketers talk to me and they'll say, okay, how do I, because I'll say one of the things I see when I audit podcasts that are existing and companies come to me and say, how can you help us? I'll listen. And sometimes the mics are really bad. They're using like a Yeti in a conference room and everyone's talking into the same mic. And sometimes they are just disjointed. Every episode's about something different in the firm. One's about employment, one's about tax. And you're like, what, who could listen to this? But more often than not, it's just super boring. It'll be an attorney sitting down at a microphone reading a document. That's not a podcast. Like, no one came to hear you monologue a document that you are reading. And so then attorneys will immediately say, well, how do I make my attorneys less boring? That sounds like a job in and of itself. And one of the things that we've done with attorneys with great results is when we're starting a show with them and we think this is going to be an issue. Some are just naturally good, especially trial lawyers tend to be pretty good on the mic. But we'll talk to them and we'll figure out where they need help. And one of the mindset strategies that we employ, we've started calling it Cocktail Party Podcast. So instead of showing up with your lawyer voice on, and this is what Chair Gensler, no one wants to hear that. Your mom will listen because she loves you. But no one else wants to hear that. And so what I tell people is, think about this. When you're going to sit down at the microphone, let's think about it like this. You're actually going into a cocktail party. It's a networking event. You grab a drink, you see a colleague in the corner. New legislation came down this morning and you have opinions on it. You get over there, you start talking. Your voice is raising. You're animated, you're gesticulating. People around you are starting to stop their conversations and lean in because they want to know what you think, what's going on. You're gathering a crowd. You are having a conversation you're genuinely invested in. That is Cocktail Party Podcast. You're not sitting down on a mic and just saying words, conveying information. You're talking about something you care about. And you're talking about it. Usually you have a co-host or a guest, and you're talking about it with someone else who cares about it. You're having a conversation that you're invested in, that you care about, that you want to talk about, and other people just happen to be listening and getting value from it. That is a really good way to approach the microphone. You're not like they sit down, they put that lawyer voice on. What happened? Because you'll see that. You'll see the partner walking down the hall and they're talking about their weekend and they're excited. The moment they sit down, they go into monotone. Bring that person back. That's the person that's going to be relatable, because that's what we want at the end of the day. We want relatability. And then to take that one step further, talk about yourself and tell stories. I know storytelling is just the most abused word in marketing right now, but people have jumped on that bandwagon and using that word because it really does matter. Now, don't just talk about any story in the world. It should be relatable. It should come back to the topic, but telling a short story about yourself is really helpful. You're having a quick conversation about the fact that you went golfing at Augusta this weekend and you had the worst game of your life and you got stuck in the trap. And it might have taken 15 or 30 seconds to tell that story, but now you just connected with somebody else. You've connected with a listener who also does the thing that you do. And even if they don't get the thing they do, they know you a little bit better. They understand you a little bit better. Look at the tabloids. There's a reason the tabloids sell so well, because people are like, what is Matt Damon doing on his Saturday? They just want to know a little bit more. And when you tell them those stories, it brings them in. I won't even get into the brain side of what a listener's brain does when you're telling them a story, but it keeps them engaged. It helps them relate to you. So two little things like that, once you know why you're doing it, two little things like that are going to help you do it in a way that is going to be much more relatable and bring people into your world.
I like the idea that steal a little bit from tabloid marketing, right? Give somebody sort of the inside look.
It's lasted this long and still continues to last because it works.
I guess you're right. I only read the covers at the checkout lines at the supermarket.
That's most of us, but go to a pool on a Saturday and see how many Us Weeklies are held up. Like it's incredible.
I don't want to know the answer to that. I got to be honest with you. So I have a two-part question for you. And this is coming from somebody who I am not a good planner, and my wife will agree with me there.
Mine too.
I'm a very bad planner, in fact.
I pack
I'm
on the
getting
last
better.
day.
Yeah, I packed the morning of, man, for like a week-long trip. But that gets me into trouble. So, and this is hard for me too, but one of the biggest reasons that I know for certain, because I speak to a lot of attorneys, that lawyers might be hesitant to start a podcast is because they say things like, I don't have the time. I have a busy practice. I got to answer the phone. I got to do this. I got to go to court. I got to hire employees. I have to do that. So what can your company sort of do to help eliminate some of those concerns? Like, what would you say to that about the time commitment required? And then I also want to know, because it's sort of about expectations, right? Because lawyers will say like, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to release X amount of episodes per week or per month. So what are some of your recommendations, right? How do you eliminate the concern about the time commitment, and how often, at the same time, how often should we be doing this?
So the time commitment objection really informed our strategy. Having been a lawyer, I understood on day one that was going to be a problem because lawyers don't have enough time to do anything. And so I understood that was going to be a problem. And so our entire strategy, our entire product offering has been evolving around that objection. And that's where we kind of landed on our tagline of you do the talking, we do the rest. We really just want you to show up. And because if we give you homework, and we've discovered this, if we give you homework, the more we give you, the less likely you are to do anything. But if we give you any homework, we're running the risk of you not doing it. And so we've really tried to get to a point where we're not giving any homework. The homework is show up and talk. Because they show up, they sit down, they're on a platform that is very intuitive. There's a producer on the line that talks them through exactly what to do. Hey, here's how you select your microphone. Do this. We hit record. They have a conversation, which they are very well equipped for. They're talking about information that they understand deeply, that they could talk about in their sleep. They could be chased by a bear and they could give a soliloquy. And so that's what we ask them to do. Sit down and talk. And then from there, we take it and we're going to do a full edit on the video that we capture from their webcams. We're going to do a full edit on the audio. We're going to make it sound really good, audio engineered if we need to, if there's background noise on the guest track or on the host track. Then we have professional intros and outros that we script, soundtracks we use only professional voice actors for. I mean, these things are amazing. And we mix that in. Then we're going to write show notes for podcast platforms. Then we write full length blog posts for the website, about 1,000 words or more, depending on the length of the episode, and summaries, time-stamped highlights. We're going to link the YouTube video in the post as well. We've got a full transcript that we link out as well for SEO. And then we do that full video edit. We do video intros and outros, and we post those to YouTube for them. We post all of that to the client's website. We also distribute it on the RSS feed. So it's going to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere people listen, your show is going to exist. On top of that, we take the episode and we turn it into, we make branded templates and we put quote images out there. We take the video clips, little 60-second, 90-second clips on branded templates with captions on them. And we make those in different formats. If you're using Instagram, landscape, square, wherever you really intend on using those, we're going to make those in the native configuration for those platforms. And so that way you have all of this content from every single episode. You're going to have a dozen pieces of content that you can use. You've got content you can share on your social streams that you can run paid ads with on your social streams. And so all of that comes from sitting down at the mic for 25 minutes, more content in a fraction of the time. And lawyers are used to creating content that will take them all day sometimes. Your business development plan has 5 blog posts on it or whatever, and you sit down and you write. Now, some people might be able to crank one out in 2 hours. Some people are not me, and I'm a decent writer, but I'm going to write it. Then I'm going to edit it. Then I'm going to go, oh, this is terrible, and I'm going to rewrite it. because I'm always thinking, oh, a lawyer's going to read this and they're going to notice my syntax, like whatever. I'm overthinking it. And when you hop on the microphone and you just talk, and then you just kind of walk away from it. And that's what most of our lawyers do. Our really large firms have very robust marketing teams, and they spend more time on the edits. But our smaller firms, our PI firms, they sit down and they talk and they're like, I don't ever want to see this again. Go do it. And so they sit down, they talk for 25 minutes and they never think about it again. And all of a sudden they've got that website with the blog post, with the transcript, with the video on it. They've got the video on YouTube, the second largest search engine in the world. And we optimize it with keywords and chapters, so it's searchable and findable. And then it's also out on podcast platforms. And so all of that stuff just happens after they hang up and they don't have to think about it.
I want to add to that because I'm the same way, right? I'm sort of like your PI lawyers. I have a team that really helps me out with all this stuff. Thank God, because I talk and then I get exhausted and then I have other things to do and I'm busy, right? Like I'm running a department here. I help run a company, and so thank God that that's handled right by these two really amazing guys who I will personally name, Joe and Tony. You guys are freaking rock stars. They already know that. But one thing that I find really cool is I use TikTok because I get bored. I'm on TikTok. I go through the TikTok, funny stuff, cool stuff, music, all the crap you see on TikTok. And once in a while, I see myself on TikTok because Joe will go on TikTok and cut out sort of like the good, the juicy stuff that comes out in a podcast, right? Where it'll be an expert. It's just like me asking a question so that the listener has some context about what the heck we're talking about. And then you hear from the actual person whose opinion really matters on that topic. And I get a little embarrassed because I see myself. I'm like, oh, I look like crap there. I gotta straighten my collar, or I sound like an idiot, or I don't know, maybe I need makeup or a skincare routine like you have. But I think TikTok is it's got such a virality to it that I think you'd be remiss in not just posting like 30 or 45-second clips that you get already. It's just so cool how much you can do with a podcast, right? YouTube, the podcast channels, your website, blogs, network. The possibilities are not endless, but they're definitely huge. So knowing all of that, and to anybody who's listening to this that thinks maybe the benefits aren't there for me, or they can't imagine like what they possibly could get from starting a podcast or working with LawPods, and they want to know, I don't know, like what's the best case scenario for me? Do you have any cool success stories that you can share about law firms that your company has worked with that might inspire attorneys to finally take the leap and enter the podcast world?
Well, I mean, here's one thing I'll say that tends to instill confidence. We don't lose clients. Clients come in and start to work with us, and frequently they've got that concern. I don't know if we can keep this going. I don't know if we have enough content ideas. I don't know if anybody's going to listen. And they're always re-upping because they find the value and it's immediate. They find listeners. People are interested. People start reaching out to them, the host, because that's tends to be who drives it. The host is spending the time and energy to actually be on the podcast, and they start reaping those benefits. They start seeing those real world possibilities coming from the podcast, and they stay with it because they see that minimal time investment they have to spend on it. And then they see all that content that comes out, but then they see the return. They see that network. They see the people coming into the office saying that they listen to the episodes, and they stick with us. And I mean, not to say that we won't one day lose clients. I mean, I'm sure that we will, but it's not something that happens right now. We're just under 5 years in business right now, and we've never had a client leave us for someone else or just completely decide they don't want to do a podcast anymore. Some of them they'll do seasons and then they'll stop for a little while because they want to make pieces of content, but we're not losing clients. People really like to stick with it. And not only do they stick with it, like we've got one of our big firms is McGuire Woods. They started with us with one show and they had that same idea, like, let's see if this works. Let's take baby steps. They have 10 podcasts now.
Oh.
Because every single person in the firm saw it going, and then they came in and they said, how can we do that? And so different lines of business said, we want to do that. And then they see how easy it is. They see that the attorneys really the marketing department will schedule the show for them. They show up, they have a conversation, and now their face is all over the place. The little audio clips of them are all over the place. They've got stuff they can send their clients. One of my clients makes a show specifically for existing clients. They're not even trying to generate new business with it. Every 2 to 3 weeks, a client of the firm gets an update to their podcast player that their attorney has made an episode for them. Now it's hundreds of clients that it's for, but it feels very personal. I am a client of this firm. I am dealing with this practice area, and they make podcast episodes to keep me informed of the things I need to know. And so not only are less people doing it, when they start doing it, not only is it like not going away, it's growing. The biggest firms in the world that we work with have multiple shows now because they started with one and they went, okay, let's see. And then they found success and they liked it. And we see that across. We have probably 10 clients right now that have multiple shows with us.
That's insane.
It's super cool to be a part of, because when you start all of this, it's easy for people to look at you from the outside and be like, well, of course, podcasting is cool. Of course, this was going to happen. But when you can't pay your taxes because you're not making enough money, in the early days and you're grinding, it does not feel like a foregone conclusion. So it's cool for this moment to start being captured and coming into its own.
I think that's, people like to look at entrepreneurs in like, I don't know, after they've made it, right? Yeah. Or it happens on a large scale too, right? Like people now look at Elon Musk and they're like, oh, he's rich because he got all the government contracts, and obviously, like, he partnered with NASA, he did this, obviously. But there was a point in time where nobody knew who that was, and he was just the PayPal guy.
Right. I mean, before that, like, I read his biography. Before that, he was like, he was doing some terrible, awful job just cleaning out like vats at like a smelting place or something, like something super awful that I don't think I would have even done.
Yeah. And I'm not, I would do it. I would do it. I'll work. I always said, if you pay me enough, I would shovel elephant shit.
That's where you and I are different. I'm very big on being like super passionate and purposeful about it. Cause like, as a lawyer, there's plenty of money to be made there. Like, it's not everybody's making money, but if you're willing to grind and do the work and you've got aptitude, like, there's money to be made there.
Yes, I agree. I'm definitely very fortunate to do something that I'm passionate about and that I'm good at. But I'm like one of those people who values like hard work. Like, if there was nothing else for me to do and there were no opportunities and that's what I had to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. But one of the things to continue that is this guy, Jason Nazar. I heard him. I think he was on Tom Bilyeu's show, and he said something that really resonated with me. He said, all effort is equal. He's like, if the effort to dig a ditch and the effort to create $1 billion company, he's like, you're going to show up. You could show up for 60 hours a week and do that work, or you could show up for 60 hours a week and do the other work. Which one of those is going to end up being more valuable to you in the long run? And man, that blew my mind. Like, the effort that you're putting in or the time that you're spending is all kind of equal. It's just, what kind of result do you want to get out of it? Where's the long-term vision going to take you? And then just kind of reverse engineering where you want to go and what you need to do today. However minute of that step it is, what do I need to do today to get just a little bit closer? And that's the entrepreneur story, is just trying to figure it out. Trying to take that one step and the next step, being terrified every day and thinking, oh my God, this is, what have I done? And then 30 minutes later going, this is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. And it's cycles of that throughout the day. But the difference is, I don't want to call them failed entrepreneurs. That's harsh, but sometimes people don't make it, and then they end up back in a job, but then sometimes they come back out. But the world is littered with people like that. And it's not just because they didn't put in the time and the effort. It's maybe it just wasn't the right time for their idea. Maybe it wasn't plausible or workable. But a big difference I see is, when it got hard, some people weren't willing to stay in it. It got really ugly. It got really hard. It got really uncertain. And some people just weren't able to stick with that. They weren't able to stay inside that really ugly place and just work it. And again, sometimes even when they do, it doesn't work. But more often than not, when people are willing to stay in there and no excuses, play like a champion, rule 76, right? You're going to make it happen, whether it's this venture or the next venture. You're going to keep at it, stick with it, find a niche, get in there and crush it. And I've discovered just from building something that if you took all of this away from me right this second, I'm going to be back on my feet. I'm going to start a different agency. If you were said you can't do podcasting anymore, I figured out enough now. I'm going to go a different angle. And it might take me a few years before you see me again. But I'm coming back.
That feels like a really good place to stop. I want to thank you so much, first of all, for being on the show. But before I do that, if any of our listeners are smart and they want to get in touch with you and LawPods, where do they go?
First, I really like the way you frame that. So now they have to say, well, I guess if I'm not smart, I don't want to get in touch with them, right? I love it. So lawpods.com, go there, check us out. We're rebuilding the site right now. So let us know how it looks. It's still under construction, but really, if you type in LawPods anywhere, you're going to find us. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, anywhere you go looking for LawPods, you're going to find us. We were very thoughtful about that in the beginning. We wanted to make sure we chose a name that was going to be easy. We weren't going to have to be the LawPods in one place and LawPods podcasting in another. So yeah, lawpods.com and then type in LawPods. And if you have any questions, you want to talk to me directly, Robert@lawpods.com. Always happy to.
Robert, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Hey.
Thank you to all of our listeners as well, especially the smart ones who go to LawPods. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. We will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show on all of these crazy platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. See you next time, everyone.